Welcome to this presentation on using the Consumerism Essay Graphic Organizer. The purpose of this graphic organizer is to generate and keep track of ideas, quotations, and sources. But a key part of what you're going to be using this graphic organizer for is that generation of ideas. So you will use it to come up with potential ideas, to come up with potential stances, to come up with potential evidence for a variety of ideas and to keep track of them. Because if you're like me, you come up with brilliant ideas and then they get lost in the middle of doing other things. So this graphic organizer is to help us keep track of our brilliant ideas. So this graphic organizer is a single page. Now that's a little bit misleading. There's just one page or one table that you're filling out. If you're filling it out in Microsoft Word, if you keep going and enter lots of brilliant ideas, the table will just keep expanding as far as you need it to. If you prefer to handwrite your notes and you need more than one page, simply print out multiple copies of this blank organizer, as many as you need. So there are 4 columns to this graphic organizer. The first column is elements of consumerism. So this is a place to brainstorm general elements. So they could be aspects, parts, problems, benefits, beliefs, byproducts, results, different approaches to consumerism. Consumerism is a huge topic, and you're going to have to break it down to talk about one aspect of consumerism. So as you think of aspects, start making note of them. I started by just listing all of the ones that I could think of, and I'll come back to talking about specifically how I filled in each of these columns in a minute. So the next column is different stances on elements of consumerism. So in the first column, you come up with that element like debt or personal debt. And in the second column, you would come up with a stance or an argument about that element, about like personal debt. And these are generally fairly big ideas, fairly big stances, fairly big arguments. They are kind of the size of a thesis or an essay topic, or maybe even like a section of the essay. They're fairly big ideas. And then the next column is a place where you are going to record different ideas that you have that are related to the stances. So it's kind of smaller ideas. It's ideas that support a stance. So it could be quotations, it could be evidence, whether that's from your own life and observations or from the sources. It could be ideas on how to argue to support those stances. It could be causes, effects, consequences, benefits, problems, solutions, counter arguments. It could be a lot of different things. If you have an idea that might support a stance, record it here and worry about what to do with it later. And eventually these ideas, these are the size of ideas that are like body paragraphs or parts of body paragraphs. And then this fourth column is where you make note of the articles you pull quotations or information from so that you remember where it is you got things and you can easily access those sources. And when I was doing quotations from the sources, I put them in the support for stances column, that third column. And then, but what I did is I made sure to give the last name, the author's name, or some identifying information so that I could figure out which source in my sources column it was linked to. This will help me if I end up using one of these quotations. It's going to help me to build the works cited page and to give credit appropriately to the writers. So what we're looking at right now is this filled out example graphic organizer. Of course, by the time you fill it out during Unit 3, it'll be much longer, but this is what a start would look like. But that's still a lot of writing on there. Where in the heck do you start? And people are going to start different places. So I'm going to explain how I started and how I got going. I started by brainstorming elements of consumerism. So I started to list as many things as I could think about related to consumerism, like personal debt, as in like credit cards or personal loans or, like payday loans. And then I got to thinking about a free college essay, and I was like, oh, right, consumerism is tied to that conversation. Educational debt is part of that. And I got to thinking about, well, I'm betting a lot of these, well, I already know, but you might predict what some of the topics are in these articles, like overconsumption, buying too much. Also, that old idea of money can't buy happiness, or maybe it can, or the different emotions that we tie to buying things, like you deserve it, or what is the Parks and Recreation quote, treat yourself. Or I actually got to thinking about thrift buying, like shopping at secondhand stores or buying things on Craigslist or all of the various ways that there are to buy used items now. And that got me thinking about recycling, reusing, upcycling. And so I just kept going. It kept leading me to different things. And then, like panic buying. Well, current events in the world made me think of that. And so I got as many as I could down. Honestly, I got about half of those down, and then I was like, oh, my brain is so dead. And so I went and looked at some sources, and I started pulling quotations that stood out to me. And so then I filled out the sources category, and I put the quotations in support for stances. And you'll notice that after the quotation and the last name of the author, I started to make notes about how they could be used. And some of those notes I added right away, and some of them I came back later and added. And really, between those two things, that got me going. And the next place I started was to focus in on things that I found particularly interesting or wanted to keep thinking about. The idea of debt, like I thought about that, I'm like, I probably could have a lot to say about it, but that sounds super depressing. I don't want to think about that right now. So I kept moving down. And this idea of recycling, thrift buying, waste, that really was resonating with me today. So I took a stab at writing possible stances. And it didn't have to be stances I completely embraced. It was kind of like testing out ideas. And waste initially caught my attention. So you can see I started to brainstorm possible arguments on or regarding waste and consumption. And I didn't hold myself back to ones that I completely embraced or was really solid on. I was just trying to get out any possible stance. And I would write and then delete and go back and keep writing. And I realized that waste wasn't as interesting, but the more I kept writing, the more interested I got. And then it kind of led me naturally into recycling, reusing, and upcycling. And that really got me going. And so I realized, hey, I think I'm onto something interesting here. Like how my idea at the time was, what if we bought things with the idea that we were responsible for recycling them, reusing them, or upcycling them when we were done with them for their original purpose? How would that change how we consumed? And so I got off on that tangent for a minute, and I decided, hey, I want to start writing more of my ideas about it. And then I realized that this quotation that I had, well, see what I'm trying to show you here in this one, before I get all excited and keep talking to you about this, is I used what was interesting to me in the two columns to build that stances column. And then once I came up with what interested me in that stances column, what got me thinking, I focused in on that. And then I started writing more. It's like, okay, so if I were going to write about this or talk about it, how would I talk about it? How would I support this stance? And so I just started writing. I wrote down what ideas were running through my head, and I let them be messy at first. And what I can't really capture for you in this slide is the fact that I would write and then I would erase and then I would write. And then I had another idea. So I hit enter and wrote that. And then I went back and kept fiddling with things. So I let it be messy. I wrote down all of my ideas here. And if you read the details, I was kind of in a cause and effect frame of mind. So I let that lead me with where I was going. But I kept going until I got the ideas kind of shaped up and laid out in that column. And then as I was going along and writing, I started to realize that I could potentially turn some of my ideas into paragraphs. So I made note of that a potential paragraph strategy. It doesn't mean that I'm committed to having to write these paragraphs. What it means is, hey, I had this idea and it might work and I don't want to forget about this, so I'm going to make a note of it. So keep in mind when you write about ideas on this graphic organizer, you're collecting ideas, you're not committing yourself to them yet. And then as I kept going, I was like, oh, I should try and come up with evidence from my own personal experience. And when I was writing this, I happened to be sitting near my recycling bins. And so I maybe haven't emptied my recycling bins as frequently as I should have of late. And I may have been doing some shopping for presents. And my recycling bins are overflowing with Amazon boxes. And so that got me to thinking. And it ended up turning into both evidence that I could use and potential ideas for more body paragraphs. So I'm trying to highlight here that, record evidence that you have from the sources, but also turn to your own life and experience and make sure and document that in this column as well. All of your ideas, all of your evidence, wherever it comes from, is worth recording in case you need to use it later. And then the final thing that I did was I realized this as I was doing it, is that all of these ideas were linked. And then I knew that if I laid this down and came back to it later, I would forget that they were all tied together, and it would take me a few minutes to figure out the connections again. So I wanted to make sure to indicate that there was a connection. And what works for me is highlighting with all the same colors. So I did this purple pink color for all of the ideas connected to recycling, reusing, upcycling, and this specific stance on it. So I highlighted that. Now, if I came back and started using this graphic organizer again, and I started writing more about waste, I would start a new color and make the connections with that. It doesn't have to be highlighting. However it is, you show those connections, great. Just do yourself the favor and show yourself those connections later when you come back to it. So you don't have to do the work of connection again and again and again and again. So some general tips on using this graphic organizer. Keep writing down ideas, thoughts, quotations, evidence, etc., even if you think they seem unrelated to other ideas you currently have, even if they don't seem connected to what you're pretty sure you're going to write about, because you never know how they might come in handy later. And it's always better to have more ideas than you need. So write them down. Keep this out and going as you're working on assignments for the class, as you're working on summary assignments, as you're doing brainstorming, as you're working on thesis ideas later, as you're drafting. Keep this graphic organizer handy. Also, make sure that you feel free to bounce between parts of the organizer as needed. I happen to kind of work my way from the outside in. But like if I were to go back and use it some more, I would bounce between the categories. It's not like there's a specific way to use this. Be flexible in how you use it. Go between categories. If you feel stuck, try moving categories. Try going, hey, this stance seems like it could go somewhere. I'm going to put some pressure on it and try and come up with some supporting ideas or quotes. Use it to get you going or to keep you going. Make sure also to keep track of ideas, where they came from, if you get them from other people and sources. And so that's especially important when you're taking quotations from sources. But you might also make a note of if you get them from specific people. Like if you were talking to your mom and this idea came up, you might just say, in conversation with mom, because that'll help you remember where you got it. And you could always refer to the fact that you had been having a conversation if it was appropriate. But you may also get ideas from your classmates in discussion boards, and you want to make sure that you aren't copying their ideas, so you want to go back and double check, but also you may want to give them credit. Definitely give them credit if it's a specific or exact idea. So always worth keeping track of where ideas came from so you don't have to chase it down later. And then make sure you're making connection or note of connections you see between ideas. It's going to help you come up with topics, ideas for your essay, or it can help you build your essay. And what'll probably happen is you'll make connections as you go along, and then kind of as you're getting closer to a draft, you know what your topic is. You might go back and find new connections in what already exists on your graphic organizer. So this highlighting of connections, this note about connections, is something that probably will change over time, but make sure you keep note of them so you don't forget all of the brilliant work and ideas you have. And as always, if you have any questions, please reach out.